Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Beyond the Pain, Heart and Home Healing After Loss. Um, this episode feels so different to me. I come to this episode with a super heavy heart. Like, my spirit is so heavy right now. I'm recording this the day after that we found out about Charlie Kirk's death. And so, I couldn't sleep last night. Like, my spirit was so unsettled. And so I'm very humbled to be recording this episode right now. I'm honored to have the chance to speak about him in any way, shape, or form and have anybody listen to it. And so I'm just very humbled at the moment. And my spirit is grieved. And so I'm calling this episode, I don't just want to sit here and talk about Charlie Kirk for no reason. I could because I love him. I loved him. He was such an inspiration to me. He has taught me so much over the years. It felt like to me when I found out about his death that I had lost a family member, it felt like I had lost a brother. So I'm not going to just sit here and talk about who he was or his political stance or anything like that. What I want to talk about today is you can see in my title is, can you grieve someone that you never knew? Because, and I'm just going to put it right out there. Yeah, yes, absolutely. You can grieve someone that you've never physically met in person. And, because I'm sure, as you've seen all over the internet, like I did a poll on my Instagram and I just asked, as I was telling my followers that I was going to do an episode about, grieving someone you've never met. I asked, does this loss of Charlie Kirk feel different to you? Does it feel different, or does it just feel like any other loss that you hear about, on TV? And the vast majority of people said, yes, this feels different. And so I want to talk about that because I'm in the grief space, I talk to grievers all the time. And so I want to talk about this from a perspective of grieving, not of politics, although I want to get into a little bit of some of that later, but without talking about things like gun violence and things like that, because it's irrelevant to grief. And that's what I want to focus on today. And so, like I had mentioned before, I felt this insane disturbance within me when I found out about his death. And so, can you grieve someone you've never met? Absolutely. And the first way to know is if you feel like this loss is different, but you can't quite describe it, is just starting with that visceral reaction that I'm sure many people experience. I certainly experience. It's that gut-wrenching, that visceral, that physical reaction. It's not just like, oh, I heard this person passed away and it's sad that they died, but it comes with like this physical response. And so that right there, if you experienced anything like that, any visceral reaction, any physical response to the loss, right there that this was a significant loss to you. And so what I want to break down for a minute here before I go any further is, the title is, can you grieve someone that you never knew? What does it mean to know somebody? You can know of someone, you can really know someone, but there's a difference between, yeah, I know them and you know them. So I want to break this down because people are going to fall into a few different categories. And I literally this is like the simplest thing you could do, but for the sake of keeping it simple, I literally Googled it. What does it mean to know someone? And it brings up 3 categories. And I think this is a perfect way to describe it. So you have someone who has superficial knowledge of someone, recognizing someone or knowing their name, which is a basic level of familiarity. So when you hear someone on the news and it's about someone you've never met, but it still makes you sad that they're gone, that we're going to call that like superficial knowledge. Then there's what's called a deeper understanding of someone, which is defined as comprehending their actions and reactions and the motivations behind them. This is the category I feel like a lot of us fall under, especially when it comes to the death of Charlie Kirk. And then there's something called intimate knowledge, a profound connection where the person shares their deepest thoughts, vulnerabilities, and personal insights, creating a bond that others cannot fully replicate. That's going to be a handful of people in Charlie's life, or maybe a bunch of people. I don't know. But that's not who I'm talking to today. I am probably talking to the vast majority of people who fall under this deeper understanding category. And that's why a lot of people feel so heartbroken right now. And again, I'm speaking in terms of the vast majority of people. This is why people feel so heartbroken, is because it wasn't just a superficial knowledge. The reason we feel like this, and we have this deeper understanding of who Charlie Kirk really was, is how he put himself out there on the internet. He was, he would speak so in depth about the topics, and political or not, about the topics that he was so passionate about. And we really got to start comprehending his, like this definition says, his actions, his reactions, his motivations behind them. You start to really get to know this person between his TikToks and his, his reels of him talking to people at the colleges and things like that. And that doesn't even, that doesn't even begin to talk about how he talks about his wife and his kids and being a family man. Like, you can really get to know someone. You can have a deep, deep understanding of who somebody is through social media nowadays. And that is who Charlie Kirk was to a lot of people. And in my words, it's all about influence. That's why people who are on social media, who have a large following, and sometimes it's not even about the large following, it's just if you're on there having an influence over anybody, you are labeled an influencer. And so to me, it's all about the influence. And my husband said it perfectly. He said, which I was like, oh, look at you being all an expert in grief. But he said the level of trauma that you experience with a loss is directly tied to the amount of influence that person had on you. And it's so true, because we think of like a significant loss as like a husband, a wife, a child, somebody really, really close to you. And of course they are, but somebody that has a significant influence on you can certainly cause the same reaction and cause us to grieve in similar ways as someone who had a large influence on us, even if we had never shaken their hand and said, nice to meet you, Charlie, or nice to meet you, fill in the blank. And, if you have done any research, even a small amount, in the world of loss and grief, which even if you haven't, I'll enlighten you. Like, you can grieve more than just a person. Anything that you consider a loss in your life, you can grieve. A pet, a house. If you have a house fire, like, you can grieve the loss of a house, a job, a career, an idea. Like, you can grieve any type of loss. And if we can grieve things that are literally non-living and that are materialistic things, we can certainly grieve somebody that we have never met. And so the simplest answer to the question in this title is yes, but I want to talk about what that looks like for us. And towards the end of this episode, I want to share with you that how we as grievers, whether it's from a previous loss or just strictly talking about this loss of Charlie Kirk, how we should be handling that moving forward. Because I have put lots of time and energy into learning how to care for yourself and all of these things. But we'll talk about that at the end of the episode. So I want to address a few issues because, again, being in the grief space, when you see a loss like this, it's so easy for it to just be political. And I don't even mean political like Democrats, Republican. I just mean, what's the word I'm looking for? People just want to come at it with straight facts when people are in the public eye, especially in the world of politics. And so I want to talk about a couple things that I have issues with when it comes to people who are now grieving a significant loss. And one of these things is, there's a lot of people out there right now who are furious that there's such an uproar about the death of Charlie Kirk. And their argument is where was this outrage when, Melissa and her husband, Mark, Hortman, I think is their last name, when they were murdered. And so I want to break this down, because although I understand from a Democratic perspective as to why, when you look at this mass majority of Republicans who are in an uproar, and it's not even Republicans, like there are lots of Democrats out there right now who are beside themselves at this loss. So I don't even like splitting that down the middle, but I'm just gonna say that I'm gonna call them the Democrats who are upset that Charlie Kirk's loss is getting more attention than people like Melissa Hortman, who was a Minnesota state senator. I should probably look that up really quick. I knew what it was, and now I'm, of course, forgetting. Minnesota state representative. Okay. And so what I want to do is I want to make very clear that if you have an outrage, or you are upset at the lack of awareness of the murder of these people, if your anger is towards the government, that's not what I want to address right now, because there's a lot of things that people would change about the way that the government does things. We're not going to get into that, because the episode is not about speaking politically. So if your outrage is towards the government, I have nothing to say about that right now. But what I do have something to say about is the outrage towards American citizens who are grieving a loss right now. So if your outrage is towards, like I said, American citizens who didn't make as big of a deal as Melissa and Mark Hortman from Minnesota and their deaths as Charlie Kirk's, I want to explain why this is. And the reason you're not hearing as much of, or you didn't hear as much of an outrage at Melissa Hortman's death, is because she didn't have nearly the amount of influence on people. It's not because her life was any less valuable or that the loss was less sad in any way. It's because she did not weave herself into nearly as many lives as Charlie Kirk did. And so this coming at this like Republicans are heartless and they're grieving this loss of Charlie Kirk, and we're immediately turning it to, well, why weren't you so mad when this person died? And why weren't you so mad when this happened? It's like, wait a minute, right now in this moment, that's irrelevant. And I'm going to get to that a little bit more later. But it's not a fair comparison to compare these two things. And I don't know about in your world, but that's the biggest comparison that I'm seeing right now. And I just don't think it's fair that people, Republicans maybe in general, or I should say specifically, it's not that they don't care about that life. It's that, or the value of a democratic life. It's that person didn't have nearly the amount of influence in most people's lives as Melissa Hortman, not because her death was any less tragic or sad. And I was very curious because, to be honest, I'd never even heard of Melissa Hortman. I don't watch the news. I am not a news person. If I'm getting any news, it's from my husband or social media, and I try to stay off social media. I try to stay relevant and up to date on things without gluing myself to the news, because it's so much negativity, and honestly, it's just horrible to be so in tune with it. It's horrible for your health. So anyways, I did a general comparison between Charlie Kirk and Melissa Hortman and their social media followings, which we can all agree that now that's where a lot of people are getting their influence from. And these numbers are actually outdated, because I went and I checked his profiles, and since this was put out, which literally is marked September of 2025, since his death, he already has 2 million more followers on Instagram than this list. Right now it says he has 7.3 million followers on TikTok, 7 million followers on Instagram, over 5 million followers on X, and 3.5 million subscribers on YouTube. So I checked Instagram, he's already up by 2 million followers. So I would imagine that every other platform he has higher numbers as well. But just based on these, the math is 23 million followers, subscribers. I'm sure a lot of these people overlap. But we're talking millions of people. And then you look at Melissa Hortman's page. She has 6.2 thousand followers on her Facebook page and 3.2 thousand followers on Instagram. Does that mean that Melissa Hortman's life was less significant than Charlie Kirk's? Of course not. She was a human being. Anybody murdered in cold blood, and honestly, I don't even know the details of how she died. But anybody murdered in cold blood or murdered at all, any type of loss or death of any life is horrible. But are you really looking at me and telling me that you don't understand the difference of uproar between the death of Charlie Kirk and Melissa Hortman? The difference in influence that this man had over people was significantly higher than Melissa Hortman's. And it's not because her life loss was any less significant than Charlie Kirk's life being lost. And so if you're wondering why America is in such an uproar right now over Charlie and they weren't over Melissa, I don't really know how to be any clearer than that. If you can't step back and see why that, if I don't care what side you fall on. If the president of the United States is assassinated, that's a big deal. Why? Because he's well known. He's got lots of followers. He's got lots of influence. Like, it's the same with any other person. It's not about anybody's life being less significant. And of course, I'm not talking to people. Maybe there's people out there who are truly heartless and really don't give a crap about when people die. I'm not talking to those people. You people, I can't relate with you. I never will relate with you. If you don't value someone's life, this episode is not for you, and nothing I say is going to make any sense to you. I'm talking about the people who clearly have a good head on their shoulders and value human life. And okay, so then we move on to the, people comparing Charlie Kirk to Irina Zarutska, I believe is how you pronounce her name. I can't even believe that. It's baffling to me that people are comparing these two scenarios, because Irina's story is all over the place. Maybe a little bit got overshadowed by Charlie's death because it happened so close to each other. But there is an uproar and an outrage about Irina's death. And so those two comparisons are baffling to me. And I don't think it's fair, because I think people are outraged about her death. And then you start seeing people comparing Charlie's death to school shootings. And, well, if you can't watch the video of Charlie being shot, maybe you should picture it being the young children and things like that. And I'm like, again, my point is to not talk politically. I'm strictly talking from a standpoint of grief and experience, where my experience comes from in the world of grief. And the reason that this is so unfair is because that is like me saying to anybody that follows me who has also lost a child, why are you not just as mad that my child died as you are that your child died? Why is that a fair statement? It's not a fair statement. Those things are irrelevant. When I find out that somebody else's child died, I don't question whether or not they're more upset about their child dying or my child dying. You should be more, it's not upset. Upset isn't the right word, because every loss is significant. When I find out that someone else's child died, that loss is significant to me. It breaks my heart. But that person's life that person doesn't have an influence in my life. So I'm not going to grieve that person the same way that I grieve someone who has a huge influence in my life. These things aren't personal. This is just how this is how we grieve as humans. The higher, however my husband said it, the more influence, the higher the traumatic of loss, the more, the word that I like to use is the more significant that the loss feels. But just like your losses in your personal life aren't as significant to me and mine aren't as significant to you, why does it matter now that it's all of a sudden political? That's the issue that I don't understand. Because when does that comparison end? When does it end? When do we stop comparing losses? when one is more significant than the other. And so to me, these are unfair statements, and we should never be putting that pressure on someone who is grieving, truly, truly grieving. And the problem that I have with these comparisons and these statements like, well, why weren't you so mad about Melissa Hortman? And where's the uproar about the school shootings and things like that? First of all, school shootings are horrific. And I think if you ask any person in their right mind, isn't this terrible? Isn't this traumatizing and horrible? That person would say, absolutely, my heart is broken for these children. Broken for these children. And every time there is a school shooting, there is an uproar on the internet. So I don't really know what these people are saying when it's, where was the uproar? There is an uproar. There might not be a Charlie Kirk size uproar because these schools don't have as much influence over America as a whole as Charlie Kirk. It's not political. It's all about the influence. And the reason that this is so maddening is because to me, it's so disrespectful to those who are truly grieving. People are grieving right now. They are grieving a loss, and these kinds of statements are just, they're ignorant and they're disrespectful. And you know, the people, you know, coming out with so many statements, and it literally makes me sick. You know, things like, oh, he got what he fought for because he made that statement. Or he had it coming, or he said it was worth it, you know, because he said that it was protecting the Second Amendment, protecting Americans' Second Amendment rights is worth the small amount of deaths, like innocent deaths that we have in the country. And so people are using that against him almost as if he deserved to be killed because he made that statement. Now, again, I'm not getting into the political things, but that's like, you would never, ever say that to anybody grieving any other kind of loss if there were no political ties to it. And that is the problem that I have. That from a perspective of loss and grief, people are saying this isn't political, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you're right. It's, in my opinion, it's not political, but the things that come out of people's mouth because there are political ties to it is baffling to me, and it is outraging, because if you would never say a statement like that to someone that is grieving any other kind of loss unless there was some sort of political tie. And so to me, if these are your first, if you are someone that falls into the person who these were your first reactions, like, well, that's what he fought for, and well, he had it coming, things like that. Like, no matter what political party you fall under, you either don't know what it feels like to grieve someone, or to be honest, you're just being simply disrespectful and selfish and telling people that your loss doesn't matter as much as this person's loss over here. And your loss doesn't matter because he said it was worth it. Like, even if Charlie Kirk said, well, he did say it. He said it was worth a few innocent deaths. It came right out of his mouth. We all saw the clip. That it was worth a few innocent deaths. That doesn't make the heaviness of his loss any less on the people who are grieving him right now. And if some person that you knew made a stupid comment about, I'm trying to think of an example. Use anything outside the world of politics. If somebody that you knew made a comment about drunk driving, I'm pulling that out of my butt. And they made a comment like, yeah, well, these drunk drivers, they all deserve to be killed. And then that same person goes and gets a little tipsy, gets in his car and starts driving, and he's killed. If that was somebody that you knew, and anybody's first reaction to that loss is, well, he had it coming because he said, Of course not. We don't speak to people like that. And if you do, you're rude and you're disrespectful. Like, we don't speak to people like that until there's something political involved. And I don't think that's fair, because it doesn't make the loss any less significant. It doesn't make people grieve any less just because there's political ties. And I think that people want to say that this isn't political, but I think the people that are making it political are completely negating the fact that this loss is significant to a lot of people, and they are proving that they don't care how this loss has impacted a lot of people. And unfortunately, most of the people that I've seen making these statements, like, nothing I say is probably going to have any influence on you. I wish it did, but unfortunately, I don't think there's any changing your mind, because that it just kind of seems like you're that kind of people. But I'm not gonna get into that. So what I want to speak to now for the remainder of this episode is to the people who are grieving, and because I'm one of them, and I've done a lot of research, and I have a lot of experience in dealing with your grief and caring for yourself, you know, after loss and things like that. And so one of the things I want to talk about is the video that is circling of him actually getting shot. Now, I saw it on accident, and I know that sounds so stupid, but it literally was, someone had shared it. This was early on. This was right after we found out that he had died. And before I could even, I was scrolling, and before I could even comprehend what I was seeing, it was, so I saw it. I wish I could unsee it. Not because I don't know what this kids in Colorado, whatever that school was in Colorado that had the school shooting, not because I can't handle that. So I don't want to see what that looks like. It's not that. It's not because I'm unaware or ignorant to what it looks or sounds like or feels like or whatever for someone getting shot. I don't need that image ingrained into my head to have compassion on the children who have lost their lives in school shootings. I have lost my own child. I don't need to watch a video of someone getting shot in the neck to know what it feels like to lose my own child. So please stop telling me that I must watch this video so that I can get a taste of what those children felt like. I know what it feels like to lose a child. And I know not everybody knows what it feels like to lose a child, but that's where the ignorance comes from with these statements like this. So I'm sorry, I went back to what I said I was done talking with, but so back to the video. If you are desensitized to things like this, and what I mean is by you've seen a lot of videos like this, you watch murder shows, a lot of murder shows, you have seen a lot of these kinds of videos, then and you're kind of desensitized to it, and watching or not watching doesn't really make a difference in how you sleep, how your mind races, how your heart races, like, then maybe you should watch it. But if you are truly grieving right now and having a visceral response to the media and the images and all these things, don't watch it. It is not, if you're already grieving, returning to the scene of the crime at this point, your body is, if you're feeling like you're in fight or flight right now because you're on edge and you're still in a state of shock and all of these things, like, returning to that is not helping anything. It's not proving the point that people are trying to prove to you. Well, maybe you should watch it so that you know what those kids over there. That's irrelevant right now. If you are deeply, deeply grieving the loss of Charlie Kirk, what you should be doing right now is stepping back from social media. And I'm preaching to the choir here because I couldn't sleep last night. Stepping back and giving your body some room to breathe, or else it will remain in this gutted feeling like you're feeling right now. And because our bodies have physical responses to grief, this is not just mental and emotional. We are having a physical response to this loss. And the last thing we need to do is set our eyes on something that makes our heart race, makes our hands sweat, and gets our, blood pressure up and all of these things. That's not helping. So if you truly want to move through this loss and move through this grief in a healthy manner, you should certainly not be watching these videos. And so, because I wish I wouldn't have seen it. I don't need to see someone getting shot in order to understand the weight and the significance of the loss. And so, and one other thing, to the people who are on the flip side of everything I just said, to the people who are truly grieving right now, be careful what you are saying in your posts. Because if you are as gutted as you say you are, and you are as torn up about this loss, a reminder to, if you've listened to literally anything I've said in the past, reminder to not use phrases like, I can't even imagine. Because if you are gutted by this, it's not necessarily your responsibility to imagine what this feels like for Erica, his wife, and his 2 children. It's not your responsibility. But the biggest thing that we can do to be there and support for people who have suffered the biggest loss, which is Erica and her children right now, is certainly not saying things like, I can't even imagine, because this is her reality. She doesn't have to imagine it. It is happening to her. So if you want to have any sort of relating to what she's going through, or have anything significant to say to make a difference in all of this, like, you have to imagine what she's going through. You have to put herself in your shoes so that you can relate. And again, it's not like we're all sitting around. We don't really know her. So we're probably not going to have a conversation with her about it. We're not going to be her go-to person. So if you don't want to imagine it, you don't have to. You can move on with your life and never think or talk about this again. Well, I'm sure you'll hear about it all over the place. But phrases like this towards people who are truly grieving are not helpful. And so that's my 2 cents about how this whole Charlie Kirk death relates to the world of just simple loss and grieving. I say simple, meaning when you take the political side out of it, meaning it doesn't matter if he was a political candidate or not. It's someone who had an incredible amount of influence over the majority, whether it was positive or negative, over the majority of America. It's going to have an impact. And it's not fair to make comparisons to someone like Charlie Kirk to someone who had not even close to the amount of impact. And so to me, the comparison is it's irrational, it's unfair, and that's how I feel about it. And so people are grieving. People have suffered a major loss, and if you're one of them, I'm sorry. I'm sorry you had to feel this this tragic loss. I'm feeling it. Like I said, I couldn't sleep last night. My spirit is disturbed. I'm scared of what's coming next, and even just explaining to the kids how big of an impact that his loss had on our lives. Even they could feel it through what I was saying. And so if anything that I said during this episode was controversial to you, or there's something that you think I'm totally wrong on, please reach out. I would love to have a conversation. I'm certainly not looking to argue with you, and I definitely don't want to talk to you if you're not willing to listen. But I would love to have a conversation with anybody who has anything to say about what I have mentioned in this episode. So anyways, thanks guys so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you are caring for yourself through this loss and being gentle on your heart. And I can't wait to talk to all of you again really soon. Signing off for now, your hope dealer, Emmy Smaz.